These were stars the world couldn't stop watching, until their sudden, tragic ends. Today, we're stepping back in time into old Hollywood glamour, a world of bright lights, massive movie sets, premieres, where thousands of fans line the streets just to glimpse their favorites. These weren't just entertainers, they were icons, larger than life, seemingly immortal. But behind the silver screen persona, they were human, and sometimes their stories end far too soon, leaving a void that can never be filled. The Golden Age brought incredible creativity and star power, but also intense pressure and public scrutiny. The studio system created gods and goddesses and controlled their lives. In the early pre-dawn hours of August 5, 1962, a call was placed to the Los Angeles Police Department. It came from a sprawling Spanish-style hacienda in the affluent neighborhood of Brentwood, a home the owner had only recently purchased, a place meant to be a sanctuary. The call was frantic, confused, and the timeline of who called whom and when would later become a point of intense debate. On the scene, the housekeeper, Eunice Murray, reported seeing a light under the bedroom door. She called out, but got no response. A deep, unsettling silence hung in the air. Alarmed, she summoned Dr. Ralph Greenson, the star's psychiatrist. Together, they forced their way in and found a scene that would be seared into the public memory for eternity. There, on her bed, face down amidst champagne-colored sheets, was Marilyn Monroe. Unresponsive. She was just 36 years old. The bedside table was a pharmacy of prescription bottles. The official cause of death was soon declared: acute barbiturate poisoning, a probable suicide. But from the very moment the news broke, that simple, tragic explanation felt incomplete, almost hollow. For many, it was simply unbelievable. How could the woman who embodied life, sensuality, and a uniquely American brand of optimism be gone so suddenly, so bleakly? Born Norma Jean Mortensen, she was a child of the foster care system, a girl who dreamed of stability and love. Through sheer will, she transformed herself into the definitive Hollywood icon. She became the blonde bombshell, a box office titan headlining smash hits like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. Her rise wasn't just fast, it was meteoric. She was not just an actress, she was a global phenomenon. Her image was everywhere, a symbol of an era. On screen, she projected a dazzling, almost blinding glamour, yet it was always coupled with a tender, almost childlike vulnerability that made audiences feel protective of her. The studios knew they had lightning in a bottle. They meticulously crafted and sold the Marilyn persona to a world that couldn't get enough, a fantasy of peroxide and perfection. But behind the scenes, the story was infinitely darker and more complex. Norma Jean, the woman behind the facade, longed to be taken seriously as a dramatic actress. She studied method acting, desperate to shed the dumb blonde stereotype she felt trapped by. She battled crippling anxiety, chronic depression, and a dangerous dependency on the prescriptions meant to help her cope: barbiturates to sleep and amphetamines to wake up. The pressure was immense. Her infamous lateness and struggles with lines weren't diva behavior. They were often symptoms of profound stage fright and the disorienting effects of her medication. Her search for stability led to high-profile marriages, first to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, then to intellectual playwright Arthur Miller. Both ended in painful public divorces. She was arguably the most famous woman in the world, loved by millions. Yet she often felt utterly, crushingly alone. Her death sent a shockwave across the globe. It wasn't just celebrity news. It was a true global event that stopped the world in its tracks. From Los Angeles to London, people openly wept in the streets, as if they had lost a member of their own family. Almost immediately, the official suicide ruling was questioned. Theories began to swirl, implicating the Kennedys, the mafia, and a web of clandestine political secrets she may have been privy to. Conflicting witness accounts, missing phone records, and evidence that seemed to vanish from the scene have fueled rampant speculation for decades, turning her death into an enduring mystery. In a way, it felt like the Hollywood dream itself died with her. The shimmering glamour of the studio system was suddenly, irrevocably tainted by a dark and tragic reality. Her cultural impact is impossible to overstate. She defined a look, an attitude, and a specific type of stardom that has been imitated ever since, but never duplicated. She became more than a person. She became a myth, an icon of beauty, tragedy, and the high price of fame, whose life is still celebrated and whose death is still debated. September 30th, 1955. The California sun glints off a silver Porsche Spyder, a car its owner affectionately, and perhaps prophetically, nicknamed Little Bastard. It's speeding down Route 466, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the golden landscape. At the wheel is a 24-year-old who, in the span of a single year, had become the voice of a generation, James Dean. He felt the car was too new to be trailered, wanting to get a feel for it before the race. He was headed to a sports car race in Salinas, a personal passion that rivaled even his love for acting. For Dean, racing wasn't just a hobby, it was another form of raw, unfiltered expression. As the afternoon light began to fade, a Ford Tudor sedan, driven by a young college student, turned into his path at an intersection. There was no time to react. The collision was horrific, a brutal tangle of twisted metal. Dean was killed almost instantly, his neck broken. His passenger, mechanic Rolf Wutherick, was thrown from the car and survived, though badly injured. The news spread like wildfire, a shockwave that rippled from Hollywood across the globe. An icon in the making, extinguished in a flash. At the time of his death, only his first major film, East of Eden, had been released. His most iconic roles in Rebel Without a Cause and Giant would arrive posthumously. The world watched him become a superstar after he was already gone. He brought a raw, brooding, emotional intensity to the screen that was utterly new. He wasn't the polished, invulnerable hero of the past. He was flawed, anxious, and deeply human. He captured the burning heart of teenage angst and alienation like no one before, giving voice to a generation that felt misunderstood and restless. The release of Rebel Without a Cause just a month after his death wasn't just a movie premiere, it was an emotional cataclysm, a public wake for its fallen star. He was young. He was beautiful. He was impossibly cool. In the minds of his fans, he was supposed to be immortal. Dying at the wheel of a sports car only intensified the mythology. Rumors swirled of him surviving in secret, a testament to an absence people simply couldn't accept. The cigarette dangling from his lips, the squinting, searching eyes, the defiantly tousled hair. These weren't just mannerisms, they were symbols of a new rebellion. He forged a new kind of masculinity, sensitive yet tough, vulnerable yet strong, that made it okay for men to be complex and emotional on screen. His unconventional choices, the mumbled lines, the sudden bursts of feeling, they felt real because they were. It was raw, unfiltered expression. The ultimate tragedy is that we only saw a glimpse of his genius. 3 leading roles, one extraordinary, indelible legacy. What other roles awaited? Would he have stepped behind the camera to direct, as he often discussed? We can only speculate on the artist he was still becoming. His death was a brutal wake-up call to the world and to Hollywood. Even the brightest, most vital stars are not invincible. A short, brilliant career with an abrupt, violent end. His story is not one of decline, but of sudden, shocking interruption, a permanent rebel, frozen in time. It was a quiet Sunday morning in London, June 22, 1969. Inside their rented home, Mickey Deans, her 5th husband, found his wife unresponsive. The world would soon learn that the woman behind that closed door was Judy Garland, a voice that had defined an entire generation, a talent for the ages. The official cause of death was ruled an incautious self-overdosage of barbiturates. The coroner stressed it was accidental, not a suicide. She was only 47 years old, but her body had simply worn out. She had lived a longer, harder life than most could ever imagine. Born Frances Ethel Gum, she was a veteran of the stage by age 2, performing with her sisters in vaudeville. At 13, she was signed to MGM, a powerhouse voice in a system that became obsessed with controlling her image, her weight, and her life. At 16, she became a global icon as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. The song Over the Rainbow became her signature, a ballad of hope she would carry for the rest of her life. Behind the scenes, studio controls were absolute, a strict diet of chicken soup, black coffee, and up to 80 cigarettes a day to suppress her appetite, amphetamines to keep her working long hours, barbiturates to force her to sleep. This prescribed dependency began when she was just a teen. Despite monumental success, including an Academy Juvenile Award and sold-out concerts, her private life was a constant, grueling battle against addiction and insecurity. Infantilized, overworked, and tormented by studio executives, her reliability faltered. By her late 20s, MGM, her home for 15 years, ended her contract. But Judy was a survivor. She reinvented herself on stage, where her live shows became the stuff of legend. All her pain and vulnerability transmuted into raw, electric performance. Audiences adored her comeback, feeling a deep connection to her struggle. They became fiercely protective of their Judy. Her death devastated millions, but it was felt with a particular sharpness within the gay community, for whom she had become an icon of survival. The collective grief and anger following her funeral is often cited as a key emotional catalyst for the Stonewall Uprising, which erupted just days later. Her story became the ultimate cautionary tale of child stardom, sharpening public cynicism about the brutal machinery behind Hollywood glamour. Her legacy is profoundly complex, a story of unparalleled greatness and unimaginable tragedy, forever intertwined. When you hear her sing Over the Rainbow, you hear it all. A young girl's desperate hope and a grown woman's deep melancholy. It is joy and pain, made profoundly, achingly human. Long before the word heartthrob was common, there was Rudolph Valentino. In the silent era, his gaze did the talking. Graceful, panther-like movements completed the spell. August 15, 1926, he collapsed in his hotel room. A perforated ulcer, surgery, then severe infection. 8 days later, he was dead, at 31. The public reaction was unprecedented. Hollywood's first male sex symbol, exotic, passionate, dominant. News of his death unleashed mass hysteria. 100,000 people mobbed the viewing. The scene was chaos. Newspapers ran sensational copy for days. Publicity amplified mourning, even hired guards and a veiled woman in black bearing roses. Ridiculed by some as effeminate, he challenged rigid gender norms. Cause was medical, yet rumors of poisoning and jealous husbands persisted. His death forged the template for modern celebrity mourning. A star whose death shook the world. Grief as dramatic as any film. The stories of Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, Judy Garland, and Rudolph Valentino are more than tragic tales from a bygone era. They are foundational myths of modern celebrity. Each death ripped a hole in Hollywood's fabric, exposing human fragility behind godlike images. From mass hysteria to the quiet, desperate end, these moments reshaped how we view fame and tragedy. They showed the unbearable price of being loved by millions. They left art and cautionary tales that still echo. Frozen in time. Valentino the lover, Dean the rebel, Monroe the bombshell, Garland the survivor who couldn't survive. Their stories blur the line between the screen and our lives. If you found this compelling, like, subscribe, and tell us which old Hollywood story you want next. Thanks for watching.